Broadcasting live from the heart of New York City to the U.S. and across the globe. This is Arise America.
Well, moving on, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is among the leading conservative names for a possible presidential run in 2016, and he recently won a straw poll at the Conservative Political Action Conference. Senator Paul also recently spoke at Howard University, and he joins us now from the Capitol to talk about the GOP outreach to African Americans and Latino voters, among other topics. Senator Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Well, we do appreciate having you. I think I'll start where the introduction is, and that is your appearance at Howard University. You spoke there just a couple of weeks ago. From your view, how did that appearance go?
Well, I think it actually went pretty well, and I think it's a beginning of a conversation. I think Republicans haven't tried hard enough with African American audiences, and so I consider it a beginning. It was an audience that I think was also predominantly Democrat, but it was a good beginning to start the conversation. Later in that week, I also spoke to Simmons College in my home state in Louisville, which is a historic black college that's been around since 1870s.
You know, we actually interviewed one of the students that was in the audience, and he expressed some concerns, which I believe were echoed by many of the students. Let me just ask my control room, do we have that clip? Okay, let's go. Let's listen to what this student had to say about your presentation. We'll talk about it on the back end.
He didn't really, tell us what he plans on doing. He didn't really catch my interest or a lot of students' interest on what's important to us. But yet he continues to say that he's a different Republican than the average Republican.
All right. He says, this student says that you said you're a different Republican than other Republicans. What did you say that, and what did you mean by that?
Well, there are several things that I think Republicans need to talk more about and that I think can be appealing to those in the African American community. One is school choice. And I think that our public education system is often failing those in the cities. Many of them are African Americans, many of them are also white as well. But I think our public school system needs to give kids the choice of choosing which school they go to. And I think that is something that has a great deal of appeal within the black community. I also talked about the fact that I think many lives of young people, both white and black, but maybe disproportionately black, are being ruined by being imprisoned for long sentences for nonviolent drug crimes. And I think that's something that we can fix. I'm working with Senator Leahy, who's a Democrat, to try to say both Republicans and Democrats can get rid of some of these mandatory long sentences for nonviolent crime. I also talked about economic opportunity, that I think the Republican message of low taxes and less regulation can grow the economy. When Reagan cut taxes in the 80s, we had 7% growth in 1 year, 8 million jobs are created. Right now, we're growing at less than 1%, and we're not creating any new jobs. So I think it is a difference of policy, and Republicans do have a large task ahead to try to let African Americans know that we do care and that our policies will help them. But we can't do it unless we show up. So part of me going to Howard and to Simmons and to other venues that I'll go is to say, look, we're showing up and we want to compete for your vote.
Senator, there has been questions about your position regarding the Civil Rights Act. What is your position regarding the Civil Rights Act as well as the Voting Rights Act?
I've always supported both and never said I didn't. I have raised questions about certain aspects of those legislation of the Civil Rights Act, but never really have said or publicly said, oh, I'm not for this, and never have introduced anything to change it. So I think some of that's a little bit overblown and overwrought. I have said, though, that I wasn't always positive that the Interstate Commerce Clause was the best way to go about this and that there were future ramifications. In fact, we just lived through the ramifications of using the Interstate Commerce Clause for health care and for Obamacare. So I'm not sure whether we should have used the 14th Amendment or a strict enforcement of the 14th Amendment, which does say the federal government does have a role, or whether we should have used the Commerce Clause. But these were more legalistic questions. And never have I said, oh, I'm against the Civil Rights Act. So I think some of that's been overblown by people who are my political opponents.
Is there anything about either one of those measures that you would want changed?
No, and I've been up here for over 2 years now, and I haven't really seen anybody, myself otherwise, trying to change the Civil Rights Act. I think that it was a stain on our history that we had this enforced segregation. In fact, part of going to Howard was me talking about how the Republicans have a great history in ending the Jim Crow laws. In fact, a black Republican in Louisville, Kentucky, was one of the ones that I've learned about recently. William Worley fought the Jim Crow all the way to the Supreme Court in a case called Buchanan v. Worley, and we won unanimously. But he was not only black, he was Republican, founder of the NAACP, but that Republicans had an important role in this and continue to is part of the message I'm trying to get out.
Senator Paul, let's move on to issues of immigration. You sent a letter to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and amongst the things that you said in that letter, you said we should not proceed until we understand the specific failures of our immigration system and why the current system allowed two individuals to immigrate to the United States from the Chechen Republic of Russia. Do you regret making those statements and in some ways what appears to be politicizing a tragedy by two individuals that were here in the country legally?
No, because I think when we look at immigration reforms, we need to address national security concerns. Last year in Bowling Green, the town I'm from in Kentucky, we had two Iraqi immigrants who came in under asylum or refugee status, and they were plotting with Stinger missiles to attack our country. It also turns out one of them had his fingerprints on an IED that was unexploded in Iraq, and we didn't do a good enough check to make sure whether he was a danger or not. So no, I think we do need to have scrutiny of those who are coming to our country under refugee status. I think we also need to have scrutiny under those who are coming under student visas. The 19 hijackers who came on a 9/11 and attacked us, several of them, or over half of them, were here on student visas. We weren't doing a good enough job because they weren't in school. We weren't doing a good enough job policing where they were. So no, I think there is room for debate in the immigration reform to make sure that for national security reasons, we're not letting people in here who would harm us.
Well, help me understand how increased scrutiny would prevent their entry. They were both very young. In fact, Johar Tsarnaev would have been 10 years old when we came in. So how would that scrutiny have affected this situation?
It may or may not have in their case. I know that the two Iraqi men that we let into Bowling Green, one of them's fingerprints were on a bomb, so obviously someone wasn't doing their job and checking their fingerprints against a database. But we do need to have scrutiny. We need to have scrutiny particularly of countries that have large elements of radical Islam that are fomenting an anti-Americanism. When we're letting people in from those countries, we need to be very careful they're not our enemies. We need to have a good process in place. I don't know that it would have worked in these kids' case, but this young man, the older brother, was going back and forth. So there is an element of visa protection that, the story is that the Russians reported that he was a risk to us and he was investigated by the FBI. Apparently, we're finding out today because his name was misspelled, they didn't realize he had gone back to Chechnya and to sort of a hotbed of Islamic radicalism. I don't think the FBI knew that he had done that, and that's a problem which we need to fix if we're going to address immigration reform.
Senator, some would probably say that it's the threat and alienation and lack of integration into American society that is one of the problems that comes out of the immigration debate. But I want to draw your attention to something that Tea Party supporters said. They were angered when you apparently told the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce that you favored a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants who were working. Can you tell us exactly where you stand on the path of citizenship part of the immigration reform bill?
Right. If you're here working and you want to stay here and you want to work in America, I think we can find a place for you. So I am for that. I would prefer that we expand work visas. So if you're here and you came undocumented, or you came and you had a visa and you overstayed your visa, let's expand the work visas and allow you to get a work visa to stay here. That's not a new category of visa. So it's a slight difference from the Gang of Eight who create a new visa. I would just expand the current visas and let you get into the visa pool for workers. Then what I would say, if you want to become a citizen, is you get in the same line somebody in Mexico City gets in. So tomorrow or today, someone in Mexico City says, I want to be an American citizen, I want to immigrate, they submit their name and they get in a line. That's the same thing I would do for those who are here undocumented. Give them a work visa, let them get in the same line, and then there wouldn't be a new pathway to citizenship, but it doesn't mean there wouldn't be a pathway. It would just be the same pathway we currently have.
I want to move to one more topic before we run out of time with you. Brian Jones, senior advisor to the past 3 GOP presidential campaigns, says this of you, that you suddenly are viewed as a serious player who will impact 2016. He says that you have uncanny political instincts. And then we understand that the Tea Party Republicans have made a comment this week at a breakfast, or that you made a comment that you were considering a run for president. So I'm going to give you a chance to make news right here on Arise America, on the network that is like no other in the world. Are you planning to run for the presidency in 2016?
I tell you what I will tell you this morning is if I do decide, I will come back and talk about it on your program. We haven't made a decision yet. There's a lot of problems our countries face. I have a lot on my plate as a senator from Kentucky that I'll keep working on. I want to be part of the national debate. We probably won't make a firm decision whether or not to run for the presidency for another year or so.
All right. Well, I'm going to remember that you said when you're ready to make that announcement, you'll make it right here. My colleague has one more question for you, Christina.
Senator, it's no secret your position on the use of drones in the U.S. I'm curious as to whether you think the climate has changed since the Boston bombings, and whether or not you would get the same kind of support when it comes to the various measures that law enforcement would like to have at their disposal when it comes to, say, counterterrorism efforts.
Yeah. You know, I've never been opposed to the technology of drones necessarily. So if 10 people are being held hostage by a terrorist or just a criminal, and we can send a drone in there and take out the terrorist, I'm not opposed to that. I am opposed to drones being used without due process. There's an exception to due process when someone has imminent harm or they're in imminent danger. But I don't want them flying over your house and finding out that you're in your hot tub or in your swimming pool or having a picnic in your backyard. The government has no right to do that unless they suspect you of a crime. So I don't want willy-nilly surveillance of millions of people, but I'm not saying that we couldn't use drones if a crime is said to be committed or if they ask a judge for a warrant. Same way with any kind of investigation. I am for more targeted investigations where you include a judge, as we always have. But what separates us from the terrorists and those who want to attack us is we will actually give a jury trial to this young man, and I suspect he will be convicted because there's so much evidence that's out there in the public. But that's what separates us from our enemies, is they will get trials, they will get an attorney. And think back to Richard Jewell, who was falsely accused of bombing in Atlanta, that when we looked at the facts, it turned out that we found that he was innocent. I don't think that will be the case here, but a jury trial is incredibly important for determining who's innocent and who's guilty.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate you being with us.